Welcome to Office Revenge Hub. Sit back, enjoy the drama.
My boss called me useless. Then I sold the company I started out from under him. Let me tell you how that happened. My name is Marcus Holland, and for 6 years I gave everything to a business I helped build from absolutely nothing. I'm talking 12-hour days, weekends, holidays, missed birthdays, strained relationships, the whole package. I was the first employee hired by Richard Chen, a charismatic businessman with big ideas, but zero understanding of how to actually execute them. Richard had the vision and the investor connections. I had the skills to make it real. We started Vertex Solutions in 2017. It was supposed to be a cloud-based project management platform for creative agencies. Richard sold the dream to angel investors, while I coded the entire foundation in his garage. Literally, his garage. There was a stack of paint cans in the corner and his wife's old treadmill gathering dust next to my desk. The Wi-Fi kept cutting out. I ate more ramen in those first 6 months than I care to remember, but I believed in it. I believed in what we were building. By year 2, we had our first 10 clients. By year 3, we'd grown to 40 employees. By year 5, we were processing millions in annual revenue, and Richard was getting profile pieces written about him in regional business magazines. He loved that. He'd frame them and hang them in the office. Never once did those articles mention my name, even though I'd built every core feature of the platform. Even though I was the one staying until midnight fixing server crashes, while Richard was at networking dinners taking credit. I didn't mind at first, and I wasn't in it for the spotlight. I was in it because I loved building things. I loved solving problems. And I was promised equity. 10% of the company, Richard said. We'd shaken on it. We'd talked about it over beers. It was going to be formalized once we closed our Series A funding round. That's what he kept saying, soon, very soon. Just wait until the paperwork is finalized. I waited and waited and waited. The company culture was intense but exciting in the beginning. We were scrappy. Everyone wore multiple hats. We celebrated wins together, pulled all-nighters together, believed we were building something that mattered. But as we grew, things changed. Richard started hiring his friends from business school into executive positions. People who'd never written a line of code or talked to a customer were suddenly making 6 figures and getting corner offices. Meanwhile, I was still sitting in an open plan bullpen with the junior developers. I didn't complain. I kept my head down and kept building. By year 6, the company was valued at $20 million. We were in acquisition talks with 2 different firms. Richard was flying first class to meetings in San Francisco and New York. He bought a Tesla. He started wearing expensive watches, and I was still driving my 2008 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for 9 months. I finally asked him about the equity again. We were in his office, glass walls overlooking the open workspace. He was distracted, scrolling through his phone. Richard, we need to talk about my equity agreement. It's been 6 years. We've closed funding. We're profitable. I think it's time to formalize what we discussed. He didn't even look up. Marcus, we've talked about this. The cap table is really complicated right now. Investors have preferences. There are vesting schedules. It's not as simple as just handing out percentages. But you promised me 10%. We agreed on that from day 1. He finally looked at me. There was something cold in his eyes I hadn't seen before. I promised we'd discuss it. And we are discussing it. But the reality is the business has evolved. Your contributions were valuable early on, but we've hired a real engineering team now. We've got a CTO. We've got infrastructure people. Your role has changed. I felt my stomach drop. My role has changed because I've been training everyone else. I've been building the systems that let us scale. I've been putting out fires for 6 years while you've been taking meetings. And you've been compensated fairly for that work. Fairly? I'm making $80,000 a year while people you hired 6 months ago are making twice that. Then maybe you should ask yourself why that is. The words hung in the air like poison. I stared at him. This man I'd trusted. This man whose garage I'd sat in, building his dream into reality. This man who'd told me we were partners. What are you saying, Richard? He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, perfectly comfortable. I'm saying that if you're unhappy with your compensation, we can discuss a raise. But equity? That ship has sailed, Marcus. You should have negotiated that earlier when you had leverage. This is business. You need to be smarter about these things. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice level. I trusted you. You gave me your word. I gave you a job. I gave you opportunities. I gave you a chance to be part of something successful. If you didn't protect yourself legally, that's on you. That's nobody's fault but your own. I left his office before I said something I'd regret. I sat at my desk, hands shaking, unable to focus on the code in front of me. Around me, people were chatting, laughing, heading out for lunch. The world kept spinning like nothing had happened. But something had broken inside me. Some fundamental belief I'd held about fairness, about loyalty, about what happens when you work hard and trust the right people. I'd given 6 years of my life to this company. I'd sacrificed relationships, health, peace of mind. I'd built the foundation of everything Vertex Solutions was, and now I was being told I was lucky to have a job. 2 weeks later, it got worse. Richard called an all-hands meeting. These were usually pretty casual, updates on company metrics, new client wins, maybe some motivational speech about teamwork. But this one felt different. There was a tension in the air I couldn't quite place. Richard stood at the front of the room with Derek Vaughan, our newly hired CTO. Derek had been with the company for 8 months. He'd worked at Google for 3 years, which Richard brought up constantly, like it was the only credential that mattered. Derek was fine, competent, but he didn't know our systems the way I did. He didn't understand the architecture decisions that had been made or why they'd been made. He was learning on the job, and I was the one teaching him. Richard cleared his throat and smiled his practiced, confident smile. Thanks everyone for gathering. I know we're all busy, so I'll keep this brief. I wanted to share some exciting news about the future of Vertex and some organizational changes we're making to position ourselves for our next phase of growth. He clicked to the next slide. It was an org chart. As you know, we've been scaling rapidly. We've brought in some incredible talent, and it's time our structure reflects the sophisticated operation we've become. Effective immediately, Derek will be taking on expanded responsibilities as our Chief Technology Officer, overseeing all product development, engineering operations, and technical strategy. My heart started pounding. I knew what was coming. Marcus Holland, who many of you know has been with us since the very beginning, will be transitioning into a new role as Senior Developer, reporting directly to Derek. The room was silent. I could feel eyes on me. Pity, awkwardness, relief that it wasn't them. I wasn't being fired. I was being demoted publicly in front of the entire company. Richard kept talking, something about streamlining communication and building sustainable leadership structures, but I couldn't hear him anymore. There was a ringing in my ears. My face was hot. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to tell everyone in that room exactly what I'd built, exactly how much Richard owed me, exactly how wrong this was. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, while my career was dismantled in a PowerPoint presentation. After the meeting, people avoided me. A few came by my desk to offer sympathetic looks or awkward shoulder pats, but most just pretended nothing had happened. Derek sent me a Slack message saying he looked forward to working more closely with me and valued my institutional knowledge. I didn't respond. I went home early. I sat in my apartment and stared at the wall for 3 hours. That night I didn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation with Richard, every promise he'd made, every time I'd stayed late or worked weekends or fixed something nobody else could fix. I thought about all the times I could have left for better opportunities but didn't because I believed in what we were building, because I trusted him. I was an idiot. The next few weeks were brutal. I reported to Derek now, which meant I had to run every decision by someone who understood a fraction of what I understood about our systems. He'd ask me to explain things, then take that information into meetings with Richard and present it as his own strategic thinking. I watched my ideas get repackaged and sold by someone else, again, just like the early days. Except now it was worse because I wasn't even being pretended to be valued anymore. I was just a resource, a tool. My friends told me to quit. My girlfriend at the time told me to lawyer up and fight for what I was owed. But I had nothing in writing, no equity agreement, no contract that promised me anything beyond my salary. Richard had been smart about that. He'd kept me loyal with words and promises while protecting himself legally. I felt trapped. And I'd spent 6 years building expertise in systems that only existed at Vertex. What was I supposed to do? Start over at some other company as a junior developer? I was 32 years old. I'd wasted my late 20s building someone else's empire, and now I had nothing to show for it except a resume that said I was a senior developer at a company most people had never heard of. The financial pressure started to mount. I'd never made enough money to save much. I'd been living modestly, assuming that eventually my equity would pay off and I'd be set. Now that safety net was gone, I had about $4,000 in savings and rent that was eating through $1,500 of that every month. My car needed work. My student loans were still hanging over me. I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, chest tight, unable to breathe, thinking about how I'd wasted everything, how I'd been used, how stupid I'd been to trust someone just because they were charismatic and confident. My relationship fell apart. My girlfriend couldn't handle my mood swings, my bitterness, my constant spiraling about work. She left after a fight where I'd said something cruel I didn't mean. I apologized, but it was too late. She was done. I stopped going out, stopped seeing friends. I'd go to work, do the minimum required of me, then go home and sit in the dark. I felt hollow, like I'd lost not just my career prospects, but my sense of identity. For 6 years I'd been Marcus, the guy who built Vertex. Now I was just Marcus, the guy who got demoted, the guy who got played. I thought about quitting every single day, but every time I opened my laptop to update my resume, I'd freeze. What was I even supposed to say? That I'd built a $20 million platform but had nothing to show for it? That I'd been too naive to protect myself? Then one night, about 2 months after the demotion, something shifted. I was sitting in my apartment, eating leftover pizza and scrolling through LinkedIn, torturing myself by looking at where my college classmates had ended up. That's when I saw a post from an old friend, Simone Torres. We'd gone to the same coding boot camp years ago before I joined Vertex. She'd gone a different route, freelancing, consulting, eventually starting her own small agency. Her post was about how she'd just closed a deal with a major client and was hiring her first employee. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not jealousy, not bitterness, just a tiny spark of possibility. I reached out to her. We grabbed coffee the next day. Simone was direct in a way I needed. She asked me what happened and I told her everything. The promises, the betrayal, the demotion, the feeling of being trapped. She listened, then said something I'll never forget. "Marcus, you're looking at this all wrong. You're not trapped. You're sitting on 6 years of knowledge about how to build and scale a SaaS platform. You know every mistake to avoid because you've already made them. You know what clients actually need because you've been talking to them for years. The only thing keeping you stuck is the story you're telling yourself about what you lost. Stop focusing on what he took from you. Start thinking about what you learned. It sounds simple, maybe even obvious, but hearing it out loud from someone I trusted cracked something open. I went home that night and I didn't spiral. I didn't scroll. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I opened a notebook and I started writing. I wrote down every feature I'd built at Vertex, every client pain point I'd solved, every technical challenge I'd overcome, every system I understood better than anyone else. I wrote down what clients actually complained about with our platform, the things Richard had ignored because they weren't sexy or fundable, the things Derek didn't even know existed. And then I wrote down a simple question. What if I built something better? Not bigger, not flashier, just better, more focused, more honest. Something built for the users Richard had always deprioritized. Small creative agencies and freelancers who couldn't afford enterprise pricing but needed real tools. I spent the next 3 months living a double life. By day, I showed up to Vertex, did my job, kept my head down, and reported to Derek. I was quiet, compliant, forgettable. By night, I built. I started with a simple prototype. I used different technology than Vertex, so there'd be no legal issues. I focused on the core problems I knew intimately: project tracking, client communication, time management. I stripped away all the bloat that had crept into Vertex as we'd tried to be everything to everyone. I made it fast, simple, and affordable. I called it Foundry. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Simone. I just built, tested, refined. Now, I used my own savings to pay for hosting. I designed the interface myself, using skills I'd picked up over the years. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. After 2 months, I had something functional. I reached out to 3 small agency owners I'd met at conferences over the years, people who'd used Vertex but had eventually churned because it was too expensive or too complicated. I offered them free lifetime access in exchange for feedback. They loved it. One of them asked if they could pay me instead because they wanted to support what I was building. That was the first $50 Foundry ever made. I kept going. I worked every evening, every weekend. I was exhausted, but it was a different kind of exhaustion than the burnout I'd felt at Vertex. This was purposeful. I was building something that was mine, and something nobody could take away from me. By month 4, I had 15 paying customers, small amounts, $20, $30, $50 a month, but it was real revenue, real validation. I still hadn't quit Vertex. I needed the health insurance. I needed the steady paycheck while I built Runway. And honestly, I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. But Richard was about to show his. One afternoon, Derek called me into a conference room. Richard was there too, along with Jennifer Park, our head of HR. My stomach dropped. This was it. I was getting fired. Richard didn't waste time. Marcus, we need to talk about your performance. I said nothing, just waited. Over the past few months, Derek has raised some concerns about your engagement level. You're completing your assignments, but there's a lack of initiative. A lack of the passion you used to bring to your work. Frankly, you seem checked out. I do my job, I said flatly. You do the minimum. That's not what we need from our senior developers. We need people who are hungry, who are innovative, who go above and beyond. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Is that what you needed when I was building this platform in your garage for 18 months? When I was working 80-hour weeks for peanuts? Was I hungry enough then? Richard's jaw tightened. This isn't about the past. This is about right now. And right now you're not meeting expectations. Then fire me. The words came out before I could stop them, but once they were out, I didn't take them back. Richard blinked. He hadn't expected that. We're not firing you. We're giving you an opportunity to improve. Jennifer is going to put you on a performance improvement plan. 60 days. If you can demonstrate renewed commitment and deliver on the specific benchmarks we'll outline, you'll keep your position. If not, we'll have to reevaluate. A PIP, a performance improvement plan. Everyone in tech knows what that actually means. It's a paper trail, a way to fire someone while protecting the company from lawsuits. Jennifer slid a folder across the table. I didn't open it. Do you have any questions? She asked in that practiced HR voice. I looked at Richard, really looked at him, took in his expensive suit, his designer glasses, his watch that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. This man who'd used me, lied to me, discarded me, and I smiled, not an angry smile, not a bitter smile, a calm, knowing smile. No questions, I said. I'll see you both tomorrow. I walked out of that conference room, feeling lighter than I had in months. That night, I worked on Foundry until 4 a.m. I didn't need 60 days, I needed 30. I reached out to every contact I'd made in 6 years at Vertex. People at agencies, freelancers, industry connections. I told them about Foundry. I offered pilot pricing. I asked for referrals. The response was overwhelming. People I'd helped troubleshoot issues at Vertex, people I'd talked through implementation problems, people who remembered me as the guy who actually cared about solving their problems. They all wanted to try what I was building. Within 2 weeks, I had 40 customers. Within 3, I had 75. I incorporated Foundry as an LLC. I opened a business bank account. I calculated my runway. If I kept my burn rate low and revenue kept growing at this pace, I could quit Vertex in 30 days and sustain myself for at least 6 months while I scaled. But then something unexpected happened. One of my Foundry customers worked at a mid-sized agency that was frustrated with Vertex. She mentioned me to her CEO. The CEO reached out directly and asked if I'd be willing to do a demo for their whole team. I said yes. The demo went incredibly well. They signed a contract for 12 seats at $75 per seat per month. That was $900 in monthly recurring revenue from a single client. But more importantly, the CEO asked me something at the end of the call. Marcus, I know this is early for you, but have you thought about raising capital? Because what you're building is exactly what the market needs. I mean, I know some people who'd be very interested in backing you. I hadn't thought about fundraising. I was bootstrapping intentionally, trying to avoid the exact situation I'd found myself in with Richard. But I didn't say no. I just said I'd think about it. That conversation planted a seed. I spent the next week doing research. I looked into how much runway I'd actually need to hire help and accelerate growth. I looked into investors who focused on solo founders and bootstrap-friendly terms. I looked into revenue-based financing and alternative funding models. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to raise venture capital. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I was going to quit Vertex. I drafted my resignation letter on a Sunday night. It was short, professional, no emotion, no explanations. And I planned to submit it first thing Monday morning. But Monday morning, before I could even open my laptop, I got an email from Richard. The subject line was "Important Update." I opened it. Team, I'm excited to announce that we've received an acquisition offer from Titansoft, one of the leading enterprise software companies in our space. This is a tremendous validation of everything we've built together. We'll be sharing more details in the coming weeks. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. This is a win for everyone at Vertex. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. I read it 3 times. Titansoft. I knew them. They were huge. If Vertex was being acquired by Titansoft, that meant a massive payout for Richard and the investors. And for employees with equity, it meant life-changing money. For me, it meant nothing. No, I'd built the platform they were buying. I'd made Richard a multimillionaire, and I was going to walk away with exactly what I'd been paid, a middle-class salary and no upside. I could have been angry, I could have spiraled again, but instead I felt clarity. I opened my resignation letter, updated the date, and hit send. Then I went into the office, packed up my desk, and left. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't make a scene. I just walked out. Derek called me that afternoon, confused. Jennifer sent me an email about exit paperwork. Richard didn't reach out at all. I spent the next 6 months building Foundry full-time. I lived off savings and revenue. I slept on Simone's couch for 2 months to cut costs. I ate poorly and worked constantly, but I was happy, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been in years. My Foundry kept growing. Word of mouth was incredible. People loved that it was simple, affordable, and built by someone who actually understood their problems. By month 8, I had 200 customers. By month 10, I had 400. I hired my first employee, a customer support person who was also a former Vertex user and had horror stories about their service response times. I hired my second employee, a designer who helped me make Foundry not just functional but beautiful. Revenue hit $30,000 a month, then 50, then 75. I reinvested everything into the product, better infrastructure, more features, faster support. And then 1 year after I'd left Vertex, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. Her name was Claire Mendoza. She was a partner at a mid-market private equity firm. She'd heard about Foundry from one of her portfolio companies who was using it. She wanted to talk. We got on a call. Claire was direct. She told me her firm specialized in acquiring profitable, founder-run software companies and helping them scale while keeping the founder involved in product and vision. She asked me about my revenue, my growth rate, my customer retention. I told her the truth. 8,000 monthly recurring revenue, 94% retention, 530 customers, profitable from month 6. She asked me if I'd ever consider selling. I wasn't sure how to answer that. I'd built Foundry specifically to avoid giving up control. But Claire wasn't Richard. She wasn't promising me things she had no intention of delivering. She was offering me a real deal with real terms. Ma, what would that look like? I asked. She walked me through the structure. They'd buy Foundry for a multiple of revenue. I'd stay on as product lead for 3 years with full autonomy over the roadmap. I'd get a significant portion of the purchase price up front, and the rest tied to performance milestones that I'd control. The number she threw out was $4.2 million. I asked for time to think. I spent 2 weeks talking to lawyers, advisors, other founders who'd gone through acquisitions. I negotiated terms. I made sure everything was airtight. And then I signed $4.2 million for a product I'd built in my spare time over the course of a year. A product I'd bootstrapped with my own savings and sold to customers who genuinely loved it. It wasn't the 20 million Vertex was worth, but it was mine. Every single dollar was mine. The acquisition closed in 90 days. I paid off my student loans. I bought my mom a car. I moved into a real apartment, and I kept working on Foundry because I loved it and because the deal let me do exactly that. But the story doesn't end there. 6 months after my acquisition closed, I got another message. This one from Derek Vaughn. Hey Marcus, hope you're doing well. I heard about your company. Congrats, man. Listen, I wanted to reach out because things have been rough here since the Titansoft acquisition. They gutted the team. Richard took his payout and left. I'm still here, but honestly, I'm looking for an exit. Would love to grab coffee and pick your brain if you're open to it. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. And Derek had been part of the system that pushed me out. He'd taken my role, taken credit for my work, been complicit in everything Richard had done. But another part of me remembered that Derek had just been doing what he thought he needed to do to survive in that environment. He wasn't the villain. Richard was. I agreed to meet him. We met at a coffee shop near my new office. Derek looked tired, worn down in a way I recognized. He told me everything, how Titansoft had acquired Vertex, then immediately started replacing people with their own team, how they'd discovered that the platform had significant technical debt because Richard had been prioritizing growth over infrastructure, how they'd brought in auditors who'd found that half the features Richard had promised in the sales pitch didn't actually work the way he'd claimed, and how the whole thing was falling apart. "They're probably going to shut it down," Derek said, "or strip it for parts. Either way, most of us are getting laid off in the next quarter." "What about Richard?" I asked. "Gone. He sold his shares, collected his payout, and started another company. I saw him post about it on LinkedIn last week. Some AI thing, he's already raising money." I wasn't surprised. Derek looked at me. "I know I wasn't great to you, Marcus. I took a job I wasn't fully qualified for, and I let Richard use your work to make me look good. I'm sorry. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you." It was the first time anyone from Vertex had acknowledged what had happened. "I appreciate that," I said. "For what it's worth, everyone knew you were the real builder. We all knew Richard was full of it, but nobody wanted to rock the boat." "Yeah, I get it." We talked for another hour. Derek asked me about Foundry. I told him about the acquisition, the work I was doing now, the team I was building. He seemed genuinely happy for me. At the end, he asked if I was hiring. I thought about it, really thought about it. "Send me your resume," I said. "I can't promise anything, but I'll take a look." He did, and after talking to my team, I brought him on, not as a CTO, not in a leadership role, as a senior developer reporting to the actual CTO I'd hired. Someone I trusted, someone who'd been with me since the early Foundry days. Derek took the role without hesitation. He was grateful just to have a job at a company that wasn't collapsing. He's still there. He's good at his work. He doesn't try to take credit for things he didn't do. And every now and then, he'll thank me for giving him a second chance. I didn't hire him to be kind. I hired him because he was competent and because I could afford to separate his actions from Richard's. But I also hired him because it felt like closing a loop, reclaiming something. As for Richard, I haven't spoken to him. I've seen his posts online. He's doing what he always does, raising money, making promises, selling a vision. Maybe this time it'll work out for him, maybe it won't. I don't think about him much anymore. What I think about is the fact that I built something real. Twice. Once for someone else and once for myself. The first time taught me what not to do. The second time taught me what I was capable of when I trusted myself. Foundry is still growing. We're at 1,200 customers now. Now we've expanded into new markets. We've built features I'm genuinely proud of. And every single person on my team has equity, real equity, documented, formalized, protected. I make sure of that because I remember what it feels like to build something and have nothing to show for it. I remember the betrayal, the anger, the feeling of being powerless, and I refuse to do that to anyone else. The revenge wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation. No moment where I walked into Richard's office and told him off. No public call out. The revenge was quieter than that. It was building something better. It was proving that I didn't need him. It was walking away from a system that didn't value me and creating one that did. It was selling the company I started, the one I actually owned, for millions of dollars while the company that discarded me crumbled under the weight of its own hollow promises. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's making them irrelevant. Richard doesn't matter to my story anymore. He's a footnote, a lesson learned, and I'm the one who got to write the ending. If you've ever been betrayed at work, you're not alone. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Office Revenge Hub for more powerful workplace revenge stories.